Hey guys, let's get more news about F1, but first, don't forget to subscribe and leave your like. Main sponsor Oracle block a multi-million-dollar deal with Red Bull. As the team of world champion Max Verstappen, Red Bull Racing is a magnet for sponsors. But not every sponsor is allowed to be on the cars, overalls, and team clothing of the Austrian team. It is rumored that the team's main sponsor Oracle have blocked a multi-million-dollar deal with the Austrian team. Perplexity, an AI company, was in talks about signing a sponsorship deal with Red Bull, according to The Verge, in a deal that would have involved $5 million. But after both parties agreed to the terms, the deal was still blocked by Oracle, the team's biggest sponsor. The Verge says it heard this from sources familiar with the matter. Moreover, the website says it has seen documents that prove Oracle put a stop to the deal. According to the sources, there were two things that made Oracle not agree to the deal. First, Oracle apparently made an offer to buy TikTok, as did Perplexity. Oracle is also a backer of Stargate, the billion-dollar project to build data centers for OpenAI. That company is a competitor of Perplexity. According to the website, Oracle has to approve any sponsor of Red Bull. That is part of the deal, which is reportedly worth $300 million over 5 years. Oracle and Red Bull Racing did not respond to repeated requests from The Verge for comment. Perplexity also declined to comment. Gamer who drove Vettel's F1 car on course for real-world racing. Standing beside Fernando Alonso after being flown to Barcelona for a photo shoot, Sebastian Job was finally a professional driver, despite having never driven a racing car. The English esports gamer had won a number of sim races, which simulate real-life races, and been signed by former F1 world champion Alonso's esports team, which later merged with Oracle Red Bull Racing. It is mandatory for all F1 teams to have an esports division, but Red Bull have done something no other has: put a sim racer in an F1 car. The speed just takes over, said 24-year-old Job in a Red Bull film called Game to Glory, external, documenting his journey from esports to real-world racing with limited laps. Job was within 1 second of the standard set by ex-F1 driver Patrick Friesaker in Vettel's 2012 title-winning V8 car, and was even more competitive in a Porsche GT3. Job is now aiming to race in the Porsche Carrera Cup at courses including Brands Hatch and Dunnington Park, after he won 3 world titles in the virtual version. I went into sim racing because I knew I didn't have the money to get into F1, and 11 years later I get to drive an F1 car. That's inspiring for people to see, he said. On the test days, we saw the true scale of what sim racing can do, so the goal now has to be to get me on the grid for the Porsche series or a similar one. Joseph Soltysik, Red Bull's head of esports, said, "We'd love to see Seb race in real life, and that vision is shared across the wider team. We're trying to find a feasible and sustainable way to fund it." Job grew up in East Grinstead, Sussex, and showed talent in karting at an early age, but his parents could not afford the next stage of that discipline. "I knew straight away the traditional route into motorsport wasn't going to be possible because you do need to have an unbelievably wealthy family," he said. Instead, he decided to dedicate himself to sim racing, and his parents bought him a setup worth about £200. "I enjoyed it and I knew I was good at it and I wanted to pursue it. But at the time, pretty much no one was doing it as a job," he said. Around 2018, people started to get paid and it lined up nicely with me leaving sixth form. The first person to employ me was actually Fernando Alonso. They flew the drivers out to Barcelona, we got pictures with Alonso, my mum came, and I think that was around the time my parents started to clock it." At that age, Job had only just passed his driving test and also won a scholarship to race in Formula Ford on real racetracks for a year. But his biggest win came in 2020 when he won the Porsche Tag Heuer Esports Super Cup with a prize pot of $50,000, £40,300. At the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, esports was in the midst of a boom, with F1 drivers getting involved and Max Verstappen racing in the tournament Job won. Many F1 drivers compete in esports, and sims, short for simulators, are used by teams to model how cars will perform, but sim racers rarely become race drivers. Jan Mardenborough's journey from gaming in Cardiff to GT3 inspired the 2023 film Gran Turismo, starring Orlando Bloom. No esports driver has gone on to compete in F1 yet. The cost of reaching the F1 grid runs into the millions, and many drivers are the sons of multimillionaires, or men who competed at a high level in motorsport and can attract sponsorship. Job believes one day sim racing will open the door for an F1 champion that would otherwise not get that opportunity. There's no doubt in my mind, I don't know how soon, but the most talented people, we probably don't even know who they are because they can't afford to race, he said. Red Bull team principal Christian Horner agrees that sim racing could make motor racing more accessible to young drivers. This challenge is to see how closely does the virtual world relate to the real world. That is the question to be answered. That is what this is all about, he said in the Game to Glory documentary. I think sim racing could eventually create a broader pool of talent for the younger drivers because it's way more accessible. Motor racing is expensive, whereas sim racing is a much cheaper version. Threat or big break? What Sainz's Williams arrival means for Albon's F1 future. Carlos Sainz and Alex Albon have been making their first appearances as new Williams teammates in private team testing. And while they appear to be getting along as well as to be expected of two mature and friendly drivers, how they rate against each other in Formula One 2025 presents risk to both their hard-won reputations. Here's how. In one very small way, pairing Alex Albon with Carlos Sainz is a gift from Williams team principal James Vowles to the designers of his squad's 2025 Formula One car. Both appendix-less these days, that's a rough 9G saving per car no other team can make. Handy, given car weight problem was what really held Williams back last year. The team now has something else more subjective, but potentially even more rewarding, arguably F1's politest driver lineup. Two unassuming and friendly characters, with emotional intelligence to back up their considerable sporting talents. An example. For years now, F1 drivers have moaned about the length of the modern calendar, completely disregarding their first-class or private travel, otherworldly life experience and salary millions. The only sage point uttered about the debate this whole time concerning their particular perspective, that traveling to such an extent is too disruptive to raise a family with proper stability, came from Sainz at Austin last year. And now he joins Albon at Williams to form Carbono, per the social media content churned out of the team's recent testing of previous cars, TPC, run with 2023's FW45 at Barcelona last week. Some will inevitably scoff at that cutesy amalgamation. There's certainly a surging narrative about how the friendliness of the current pack overall jars with the needle beloved in drivers of past generations, and still seen in less regular episodes these days, as with George Russell and Max Verstappen. But however well these two really gel at Williams, this is how it starts. Sainz arrives after an emotional fourth and potentially final season racing for Ferrari. He channeled the devastation of losing his seat with the Scuderia to Lewis Hamilton into that string of brilliant performances at 2024's commencement. This included that sensational Melbourne win almost 2 weeks to the day he'd been under the knife in Jeddah. Now former teammate Charles Leclerc responded with his best season-long F1 performance overall. But Sainz was so close, again, that the pair were regularly trying to occupy the same piece of racetrack. Sainz gave absolutely no quarter to Leclerc all year long. The pair even came to minor blows on his home patch in Spain. And there was much team radio chatter around their Las Vegas contretemps, both amusing and wince-inducing from Leclerc, plus those eye-catching sprint battles in China and at Austin. But Vowles told me last year that for him, that's normal, one driver will always be frustrated by what it is. If we're fighting for a win or a podium, so be it, he added of how Sainz may scrap with Albon one day, in admittedly wishful thinking for Williams in 2025. but given Sainz's tremendous performances for Ferrari elevated Leclerc, the time has now arrived to wonder what they will mean for Albon's F1 reputation from here on in. This reputation is much restored after Albon endured the savage rapidity of Red Bull promotion/demotion in 2019 and 2020, going the full length of the energy drinks company's brutal F1 driver conveyor belt in just 2 seasons. In Williams, he found the best possible place for rehabilitation and subsequent growth. The team needed a talismanic replacement for Russell from 2022 and got it in Albon, who paired regular starring drives in qualifying with even better race performances. And did so arguably more often than his friend did in the same spot. From then until Sainz's arrival, Albon has been clearly the best driver in Williams's lineup. Nicholas Latifi and Logan Sargent never got close, with Franco Colapinto getting a surprise and extended cameo to measure himself at F1 level last year. Colapinto, of course, did well enough to almost earn himself a perilous ride on the Red Bull driver journey. Before his Interlagos and Vegas crashes finally put off Christian Horner and co., for the start of 2025 at least, Colapinto had done well enough to eclipse Sargent immediately. And, to some, Albon had therefore been found out by his new teammate. Colapinto did make waves out-qualifying Albon at Austin and in Baku, but that's where Albon lost the ground he'd been holding to that bizarre fan issue. Overall, however, only once did Colapinto offer better race pace than Albon, around the many incidents that complicated such comparisons. For a full breakdown of this data, see the February issue of Autosport magazine. Of these, while Albon made some unexpectedly poor errors in 2024, that Melbourne FP1 crash that led to Sargent's crushing standing down, for instance, the tricky FW46 did little to help its pilots. Indeed, early on when the drivers crashed pushing hard to overcome its extra weight, the metal parts that had been added because they were quicker to produce even damaged chassis tubs and further contributed to the team's spare parts problem. Sainz, though, is a clear step above Colapinto. He is now Albon's best teammate since the London-born Thai driver was last paired with Verstappen in 2020. The risk that he in turn might surpass Albon is clear, but there's a relevancy narrative in this assessment that can't be ignored right now. At this point in time, it's just as likely that Albon will emerge as the stronger driver of the two in F1 2025. He's spent 3 years learning Williams, even around how he feels every year it's constantly evolving, whereas Sainz is learning his way around a 5th new F1 squad in his decade in the championship. But there are other early indications that this season's subplot could well be beneficial for both parties. And this is exactly what Williams is hoping for. In terms of their driving styles, both are very smooth on turn-in, evoking memories of Jenson Button in a Williams a generation ago. They like a stable rear end, with Albon even taking a regular step to unwind steering lock past the apex to ensure good traction on corner exit. Sainz tends to load up the front axle by turning in slightly earlier than most of his peers. And while Sainz's best Ferrari results came when he could hone his slight preference for an understeering front end with a handling sweet spot, they will be pulling in the same car development direction, which is already of considerable benefit to Williams. The other indication that this pairing is likely to remain jovial is how the 2025 campaign is about looking forward to what we have in 2026 together, per Vowles. That's in terms of what Williams can gain with the upcoming rules reset, if it gets things right on car development. Vowles also feels what I love about Alex is he's a leader. He adds, when things get difficult, he pulls forward. Irrespective of what the circumstances are. And that lifts the team back up to emotional strength. He was the one encouraging us to get Carlos into the building because he's not worried about a challenge, he wants us to be successful. So, Alex is everything that I know he can be and wants to be. And indeed Albon recognizes Sainz's experience and his knowledge from Ferrari is going to help a lot in the coming campaign. He will be a good team leader as well, Albon continues. He's well-spoken and he's very articulate. He comes from a strong engineering background too. I think he's good in that sense. So, how we take his information and how we can apply it to our car will be really important, too. Ultimately, hard-to-shift narratives are acquired quickly in F1, just ask Sargent. And, for Albon, Sainz flattening him in 2025 would require another round of reputation restoration, even if this campaign apparently matters little beyond prize money stakes for Williams, not a caveat to be dismissed lightly with so many millions attached. But, precisely because of how good Sainz is and what he has already shown in a Class A squad, this year Albon actually has the chance to lay down an impressive marker of his own. If he can beat a four-time GP winner, he could yet earn himself a more concrete way back to the big time beyond the since superseded option offer to possibly rejoin Red Bull from 2026, which his fine early Williams form had already earned. And if he helps Williams finally complete its rebuild to winning ways come 2026, all the better too. Whatever happens, however, expect it to come with utter class. And you, fan? What do you think of the situation of Carlos Sainz? Leave your opinion in the comments.